What is a poetry explication? A poetry explication is a short analysis which describes the possible meanings and relationships of the words, images, and other units that make up a poem. In other words, a poetry explication is an analytical essay that comments on a poem's elements and possible meanings. When explicating a poem, a writer makes connections between the narrative of the poem and the literary choices the poet speaker uses to convey that narrative, such as imagery, tone, rhythm, and meter, and word choice. Writing an explication is an effective exercise for a reader to connect a poem's plot and conflicts with its structural features. So, important techniques of approaching and writing a poetry explication require adequate preparation. Before writing your essay, it's best to take the time to read the poem to yourself at least twice to gain an understanding of the plot, structure, speaker's point of view, and main ideas. Read the poem over and over. If not in a testing situation, read it out loud. Then read it out loud again. Practice different ways of placing emphasis to get the most meaning. Then repeat as necessary. Poetry is a spoken art. It needs the human voice, your voice, to come to life. Consider the poem as a dramatic situation in which the speaker is addressing an audience or another character. And remember that you need to separate the narrator of the poem from the poet, particularly if you know the poet's identity. Do not conflate the poet's point of view and personal life with the speaker's life. Every analysis begins by identifying and describing the speaking voice or voices, the conflicts or ideas, and the language used in the poem. Ultimately, an explication is a discussion of the art and the craft of language. An explication shows how the form of the poem deepens the meaning of the content. So let the poem dictate the response. The extra dimension of poetry derives from its insistence that meaning itself cannot be divorced from form, as form in successful poetry always follows function. The purpose of an explication is to show for an individual poem how the content is true. In the beginning, state very literally and in one or two sentences what the poem is about. What is the most obvious statement you can make about the situation that the poem concerns itself with? Do not scare yourself with deep meaning. Start very literally by paraphrasing the poem. The reader can determine the basic design of the poem by considering good questions of who, what, when, where, and why of the dramatic situation. What is being dramatized? What conflicts or themes does the poem present, address, or question? Then deduce the poem's theme. The poem subject will be its wonderfully particular, local, personal concerns. Its theme will be that part of the work that communicates more widely, that tries to say a truth. Don't reduce the poem to a cliche. Good poems record hard-won and sometimes devastating truths. Reading them well makes us struggle to know, feel, and express those things about living that are not easy to know, feel, or express. Who is the speaker? Define and describe the speaker and the speaker's voice. What does the speaker say? Who is the audience? Are other characters involved? What happens in the poem? Consider the plot or basic design of the action. How are the dramatized conflicts or themes introduced, sustained, resolved, etc.? When does the action occur? What is the date and or time of day? Where is the speaker? Describe the physical location of the dramatic moment. Why does the speaker feel compelled to speak at this moment? What is the speaker's motivation? What is the emotion of the poem? How does the speaker feel about what he or she is talking about? What can you infer about the speaker? What kind of person is he or she? Remember that because most poems are about human beings, they are often expressions of complicated mixed, and conflicting emotions. Always try thinking in terms of both rather than either or. To whom is the speaker talking? To him, herself, to someone else? How does the audience of the poem affect it? In regards to the details of analyzing the structural design of the poem, focus on the poem's parts, namely how the poem dramatizes conflicts or ideas in language. By concentrating on the parts, we develop our understanding of the poem's structure, and we gather support and evidence for our interpretations. Some of the details we should consider include the following. Form. Does the poem represent a particular form? Sonnet, sestina, etc.? Does the poem present any unique variations from the traditional structure of that form? How did the poet organize the poem, and why? Is it a question and an answer? Is it a short story? Is it an epic story? Is it a list? Is it a conversation? Is it a description? Where, emotionally speaking, does the poem begin and where does it end? Be willing to be surprised. Things often happen in poems to turn them around. A poem may seem to suggest one thing at first and persuade you of its opposite, or at least of a significant change or qualification. Discuss the journey the poem takes from beginning to end. Rhetoric. How does the speaker make particular statements? Does the rhetoric seem odd in any way? Why? Consider the predicates and what they reveal about the speaker. Figurative language. What metaphors, similes, images does the poem use? When and why does the speaker use them? Keep in mind that a poet uses figurative language when more literal ways of speaking seem inadequate or inappropriate. Discuss what further dimensions of human experience can be delved into when literal gives way to the figurative. Syntax. Consider the subjects, verbs, and objects of each statement and what these elements reveal about the speaker. Do any statements have convoluted or vague syntax? Be very alert to word choice. Discuss the kinds of language the poet uses. Are they simple, everyday words? Words from a particular occupation or walk of life? Are they slang words, abstract, philosophical, from religion, or sports, or banking, from the world of nature or love or domestic life, or politics or painting, or childhood or computers or psychology or law? From what world of experience does a group of words derive? Be alert to unusual words or usual words used in an unusual way. Try to say why this word is effective, what kind of very particular meaning it communicates, what it suggests. Try substituting a synonym of the word and explain to yourself why the poet's choice serves his or her purpose better. Look up the word in the dictionary and find out how old it is, what kind of journey it has taken to get to this poem. Vocabulary. Why does the poet choose one word over another in each line? Do any of the words have multiple or archaic meanings to add other meanings to the line? Use the dictionary as a resource. Look up anything you don't understand. An unfamiliar word, a place, a person, a myth, an idea. Look up words you do understand to help you articulate connotations. Analyze the design line by line. Look for certain patterns to develop which provide insight into the dramatic situation, the speaker's state of mind, or the poet's use of details. Some of the most common patterns include the following: rhetorical patterns, rhyme, patterns of sound, visual patterns, rhyme and meter. Listen to the sounds of the poem. Does it rhyme? Does it use alliteration? Does it have an interesting rhythm? What do the words sound like? Are they smooth or harsh or dull? Do they move quickly or slowly? When writing the explication, the work should follow the same format as the preparation. Begin with the large issues and the basic design of the poem and work through each line to the more specific details and patterns. The introductory paragraph should present the large issues. It should inform the reader which conflicts are dramatized and should describe the dramatic situation of the speaker. The writer should simply start explicating immediately. A foolproof way to begin any explication is with the following sentence. This poem dramatizes the conflict between, then fill in the blank. Such a beginning ensures that you will introduce the major conflict or theme in the poem and organize your explication accordingly. The following paragraphs should expand the discussion of the conflict by focusing on details of form, rhetoric, syntax, and vocabulary. These paragraphs explain the poem line by line in terms of these details and incorporate important elements of rhyme, rhythm, and meter during the discussion. The explication has no formal concluding paragraph. Do not simply restate the main points of the introduction. The end of the explication should focus on sound effects or visual patterns as the final element of asserting an explanation. Or the writer may choose simply to stop writing when he or she reaches the end of the poem. Ultimately, briefly summarize the poem's narrative in the introduction of the essay for context. Then develop a clear thesis statement that addresses the major analysis points. Choose 2 to 3 areas of focus such as theme, sound, and/or imagery, which can be shown through supportive evidence. When concluding the essay, briefly summarize the main points, but leave the reader with a thought-provoking note. On the other hand, one can also conclude your essay by addressing the analysis of the poem's ending. Essentially, conclude with what is worth noting upon a good reading of the poem.